Hi, this is Gwen, and I just wanted to show you how I've made some of the pages in this little file folder art journal that I have made. This is just file folders, and there's some hot press watercolor paper and some of Tim's craft substrate papers in here. And I've put all of this together and made this into a book. I just have used a pamphlet stitch, which you can see here. And right now I've got the cover done and one side of each of the spreads inside of it done. Well, I'm going to go through and show you how I've made each one of these just using the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide inks and my stencils. So let's go ahead and get started. So first I want to start with this first page in here. And you can see this is this side, and I've used a little bit of distressed ink in this one as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to get out, we'll do this other side here and kind of make them to match. And then I wanted to have the watercolor paper in between. I'm just going to leave so that I can write on it, I can draw on it, whatever I want to do. But I'm going to go ahead and just start with the distress inks. And I'm going to just get a piece of scrap paper here underneath, just in case. And I'm going to just get some of these blenders and go ahead and just start putting some color down with the distress inks before I go over with the distress oxides. So I'm just going to go in here and randomly start blending. I'm not too worried about how this is all going to look because this is the base layer and it's really just meant to get some color down for me to work on top of. Also knowing that a lot of the color is going to come up as I work with the distress oxides on top of it. Alright, next, I've got that done, and now I want to add a little bit of the distress oxides on top. So I'm using I have different ink pads, these blending foams for the oxides, because I don't want to get those contaminated. And now I'm going to just add just a little bit on top, because they're going to look different on top of each other. And I like the way that they layer, and then I still get the ink from the distress inks. When I add the water, that will come up through the layers as well, and I'll get some of that bleeding through, which I want. I want to have those colors kind of blending together because they'll look different. So we'll add some vintage photo. Now, let's go ahead and get that spritz of water. Alright, and now we're going to dry. I'm just making sure it's dry to the touch, not super completely 100% dry, but enough that I can work on the next layer. But I love this right now. This is just a fantastic background all on its own. But I'm going to go ahead and get the next layer on here. You can't see it really well, but there's a little bit in here, this pattern in the very back. This is my Art Deco Sunburst background stencil. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to take some fired brick now and go ahead and just kind of randomly start stenciling this into the background. And I really like how opaque this is, so you can still see that even though the background that I'm working on is brown, it's pretty dark. I'm pretty happy with that. So let's set that aside for now. And now I'm going to just mist it just a little bit. One of the things that I love about the oxides is how I can mist them just a tad and it's going to lose this sharpness enough to blend the ink into the background so that everything really just melds together so that it all kind of looks like one layer and yet it's still separate layers. So you can see how that starts to spread just a little bit. The lines are still there, but it gets indistinct enough that the layers mesh together really beautifully. So I'm going to go ahead and dry this now. All right, so you can see how that oxidization that happens with that color has made it so that it fades and just blends together so beautifully, and it's still there, the pattern is still there, but it looks fantastic. So now I'm going to switch colors. Let's go to, I'm going to go to Iced Spruce. And get another stencil. It's one of my favorites. I'm going to use the X Rose stencil by Michelle Ward. And on this side, I've got the larger X's on the bottom right corner, and then they get smaller and smaller, so I'm going to reverse that. So bring this over here. And I like to have them go off the edge. I think that helps to get a little bit more tension, and it anchors the design a little bit on the sides so that I don't just have floating pattern. Now I'm going to come back through with the smaller X's and start to just fill in a little bit more. Same color. And just start to add some here and there. Alright, I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So let's go ahead and we're going to spritz that because again, I want this to kind of mesh into the background, but just a light mist. I'm not doing any big drip drops. And we'll dry. Okay, this is looking really nice. You can see how the whole thing gets more and more oxidized and the elements just keep blending together and they really just meld into one cohesive piece. So now I'm going to pull out, I'm going to take, this is the Inside Out stencil by Seth Apter, and I'm going to switch to some Abandoned Coral. And I just want to get a little bit of this texture and maybe some of the words to come in here. Gonna spritz and dry. All right, we're all dry now, and just the final layer of stenciling. I'm going to take another one of Seth's stencils. This is the Numbers stencil, and you can see how I've used that here. And I'm going to get my black soot, and let's get our black sponge. And I like this little line part here is nice coming off the edge. One more time, go ahead and spritz and let that meld into the background. Let me dry that. Okay, and you can see here how many layers of ink I've managed to put on here without really creating mud. You can still see all of the pattern, but you have all that fantastic oxidizing effect that's happening from the inks in the top. And now I'm going to grab, this is the archival ink, this is Tim's archival ink palette, and I'm going to pull that number stencil out again and just a little continuity again with what's on the other side. Get some numbers. I like to create a visual triangle of the elements, so I think I need something else right there. So the stenciling is done. I'm going to grab some of the tissue tape, which I like to do. I do this in my journals all the time. This is fantastic for just covering up that border, adding a little something extra. You can tear it, but I like that to be a little bit neat. And then I'm going to take this Distress Collage Medium with the Vintage finish and just a cheap brush. And I like to do this just to get that to make sure that it sticks on the page, but also this nice vintage color is going to tone down, take a little of the brightness out of that tape so that it'll blend. a little bit more with the background. There we have it. That page is finished, and you can see I've got two pages that kind of go together here. And you can see there's a little bit of a difference. I've used more of the browns in the background on this one. They don't have to look exactly the same. And then my finishing touch that I do on pretty much all of my pages is I'm going to bring this back again. I'm going to do this nice dark brown on the outside here, the ground espresso. And I just like to edge. But I like to edge, I like to frame my pages. And then I'm going to switch out and go to black soot. And there you go. Now we can move on to the next page.